Okay, my name is Judy Adams, and I'm here with Francine Phillips in her home in Palestine, Illinois. And this interview is being conducted on March 18th, 2014. And I want to thank you for the interview. And the purpose of the IamPalestine interviews is to gather personal histories of the people who have lived in Palestine most of their lives and have helped shape it. So, Francine, what is your full name?
My name is Francine. My maiden name was Francine Phillips.
Okay. And what were your parents' names?
My parents' names were Francis and Edgar Nicholas.
Do you have any siblings?
I had a brother. His name was William Edgar Jr. They called him Bill. And he was deceased.
Where were your parents from?
They were from southern Illinois, down around East St. Louis, Mulkey-town, little town, south of Christopher, Pinckneyville, mostly southern Illinois.
Okay. Where were you born?
I was born in Indianapolis.
Huh?
And I was 3 years old when we moved to Palestine. We moved here because my father was a railroad man, and they had the new shops here in Palestine, and it was really a bustling area for railroaders, and they're hiring a lot of people. So my dad moved from the Indianapolis division to the Palestine division.
Oh, okay. Do you mind telling me what year you were born in?
I was born in 1915.
Okay.
98 years ago.
Wow. Right. So what was it like growing up?
It was different. And I think back and I can remember the good times. The thing that I can remember mostly is how free we felt compared to today. And my brother was 2 years older than I am, and he had a little coaster wagon, and we went everywhere in that coaster wagon. As I recall, we lived out on the Frankfurt Street, I guess it is. And we'd take that coaster wagon, and my mother would send us all the way up to the ice plant, which is where it's located now, or where it was. And one time he took me to the ice plant in the coaster wagon, and I rode out to my home on that cake of ice, and cried all the way because it was so uncomfortable. But we lived almost next to the last house on that street, so that was a long way to go. Pulling me on a good bit, and we were by ourselves, about 3 and 5 years old.
Wow.
And my mother didn't think to worry about it.
Things were a lot safer back then.
They were safe.
And you felt safe.
And of course, there weren't the automobiles that there are now. There weren't, traffic was, and people looked after everybody. It was just a nice thing to cut to the childhood.
So where was the ice plant located?
It's located at the very end of Jacksonville, Jackson Street.
Okay.
And let's see, let me tell. It was it's where the highway curves.
Okay. Is that where Faye Adams lives?
On Street North, where Faye Adams' house.
Okay.
So, and we lived in the next to the last house on
East.
The main highway. It wasn't the main highway at the time.
Okay. So, did you go to school in Palestine?
I went to all my schooling in Palestine. except a couple of years at least. I don't know. I started this school in the green building. Well, the lot is a vacant lot now. It's right north of where the high school is at the present time. And there was a big full green building. Mm-hmm. And I went 2 years to that school, and then I moved over to the grade school.
Where the high school is now?
Right.
What was the name of that school across the street from where the high school is now? I've copied pictures of it to the side.
I think it was just the first and second. Well, at one time they had four grades. Okay. 4 grades. I don't think it had a name other than public school.
Okay. So then you went through the 8th grade at the grade school there on Main Street?
Yeah.
And then high school out?
High school at the old high school.
Yeah, where the grade school is now.
Right.
Okay. And then you spent 2 years at Eastern?
Yes.
Did you have any certain teachers that had a big influence on you?
Oh, yes, of course. There was the Stats and Ruth Miller. Roe Dyke was the superintendent, principal, whatever you call him. Mm-hmm. And he was everybody was very stern, and everybody bunched to his commands.
Oh, okay. They had corporal punishment back then, I assume.
They definitely did.
Yeah, things are different now. Mm-hmm. Do you have any more memorable moments from school?
Yes. One time, I was about the 5th grade, and I talked about corporal punishment. If somebody did something bad, they were punished in a bad way. One time, we had a boy who was a little bit of a mischief, but he didn't know any better, and he did something wrong, and I can remember so, and the principal fought him. He threw him right across the room, and I could never ever forget that. And that was just how that boy was treated. And the boy was not killed.
Yep. They wouldn't get by with that today, would they?
I can also remember an event. We used to have what they call for somebody's birthday or something. We used to have what they call a fruit shower, and we would bring oranges, apples, whatever. We would roll down the aisle. We sat at our desk and we rolled them down on the floor to the teacher. Well, I was about in the 7th grade, and beginning to feel like we knew it all. But anyhow, one boy in the class didn't roll his orange or apple or whatever it was. He threw it, and he hit the teacher in the eye and blacked his eye. And that was the last of the fruit shower.
Oh my gosh. I hate to say this, but I think we have a problem here.
Okay.
We might have to start over. It's telling me I don't have any audio.
Oh. Great. I can remember yet how every day I looked forward to the teacher read the book The Secret Garden. She read a chapter a day. I couldn't wait to get to the next day to read the next chapter. And I can remember so plainly. I told that teacher, and at the time afterwards, several years after, how I enjoyed that and what a great book that was. So that's one of my good memories.
So do you think that's one of the reasons you love to read
I think so.
still today?
I think so. I always loved good stories. As a child, I loved the teeny weenies in the cemetery. And, oh dear, I could lay on my tummy in the morning and look at that all day and imagine how the teeny weenies.
So there was a lot of changes that took place while you was growing up. Can you tell us about a few of them?
There were changes. I could remember when Palestine didn't have paved streets. All of the streets were dirt streets, even Main Street. Even one of the first season, I think it was what highway now going to Robinson, was a narrow one-lane concrete street all the way to Gordon. Then it was there was a tree growing right in the middle of the highway, and you went around the tree when you were going west, you went around the other side when you were going east, and they later took the tree out, of course, when they paved the streets. And I can remember as a child watching the big machinery paving Main Street. I think I was only it's in the early 1920s, I think, and sometime in the 1920s, when the paved Main Street. And I love to watch big machinery. I think if I had been a boy, I would have been a mechanic or a carpenter or something like that, because I loved it all. But there was a man, I think his name was Ransom. They called him Susie Ransom. And I think it was his big machinery that paved Main Street. I was only around 7, just a young kid. And I loved when I could stand up and watch them paving the street. I could watch it all day. My mother didn't seem to be worried about me. And we had a blacksmith shop within the close by, and I loved to watch it go. Shoe horses, and I can hear yet the ping of the hammer on the anvil, wanting to go up there and watch and see what it would do.
You had a healthy curiosity.
I had a definitely healthy curiosity.
So, after the 2 years in college, what did you do?
My main concern was, well, it was depression years. Very, very difficult to come by money for education. But I got a job. I worked for the gas company. They were putting in the gas lines in Palestine. And I got the job of making out the bills and keeping the office open. It was on Main Street, located somewhere around about where the Cynthia's restaurant is. I was paid well. My salary, I can remember exactly, was $21.67 a month.
Wow.
But I saved the money.
Things were a lot cheaper back then.
Inflation
has taken its toll. $21.67 a month. And you saved money from that.
I suppose that by that time, I think that was about the time. Let's see. I don't know, there was something taken out of that money. I was probably should have gotten $2 or $3 more, but that was the amount I got in it.
Okay. So how did you meet your husband?
I met him in school. We had a group of kids young teenagers that we loved to dance. We didn't have any place to go, but we all had, most of us had record players, and we take the record players and go to different basements in town or houses, and sometimes the parents would even roll up the rugs for us, and we danced and played our records. It was quite a gang, and they were good kids, and they had fun together. And he was in that gang. He was the same age as my brother, and it was my brother's friends and my friends, and there were several, and we had a good time. We weren't dating at the time, but we loved to dance together, and that's how I know. That's how we became better friends.
Well, it's always good to be friends before you fall in love with somebody, isn't it? So, when did you actually start dating him then?
In high school. Went to parties together, and he went off to the University of Illinois to school. And as I said before, it was very, very hard to come by the money for more education. And he finally transferred to Eastern and went there. And let's see, we were married in 1936. We rented a house and only paid $10 a month rent. But it was a nice house. It was modern, and the furnishings for our house were what we could come by with. My parents gave them my bedroom furniture, and we used whatever we could find. But out of my $21.67, I saved $100. And we went to the I bought a living room suite, a couch and a chair, and paid maybe $50. I bought a 9 to 12 rug for the floor, and I remember that was $25. So we baked things. We bought a little kitchen dinette and chairs that would have been unpainted, and we bought it from Lloyd Mercer, and paid, I think, $10 for it. So that was our kitchen. So we made do. We were happy.
Good. So then, how soon did you start having children? Did you have any children?
We had a baby boy 2 years after we were married, and the baby only lived 6 days. It was a heartbreak. His name was Craig, and apparently he just injured someone, and it was a difficult time now.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I did. I'm having that. Get off the town.
Yeah, that would take its toll. Mm-hmm. Something you never get over.
Yes.
That's too bad.
Then 2 years later, we had a little girl, and she was the apple of my eye. And 6 years after that, we had another little girl, and that in the meantime had been in service and been overseas, and so we were all set. We moved out and came to Grandfather Patton's home, where we live now, and we heated the home with, let's see, we had a soft coal stove in the parlor was at, a hard gold stove in the living room, a range in the kitchen, and a wood stove in the dining room. And my biggest problem was taking out the ashes for morning and keeping the kids out of the coal buckets.
Mm. Everybody heated with coal back then, didn't they?
Everybody, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And still believe it. Unless you had a newly built house or
Mm-hmm.
whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But we didn't suffer through that. We had a strength to both people living in the house.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody at the time living through the depression and the difficulty coming up with living.
Mm-hmm. Did most people have during that time running water and?
Yeah, we had running water. We had bathrooms,
Mm-hmm.
and we were comfortable.
Mm-hmm. So the name of your husband is?
His name was Gene Kent Phillips. He was born in Memphis, Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
They lived. He went to lots of schools. They moved from Memphis to New Orleans. They lived in New Orleans for several years. He moved to Knoxville, Tennessee. They moved to Chicago. And the group that he was working for was moving to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And his father had some health problems, and he didn't think that at the time Pittsburgh was supposed to be very, very smoky, and that the air was stuck to them, so they decided they would move. So he started looking for a new thing, and that's how he came to Palestine. Brought the Palestine language.
What was his mom and dad's name?
Clarence Phillips. And in his retirement, he goes to work at the great carbon science. But after much research and he did not live until to see that it was finished. But in the later years, put the book together and had it published in the summer. So I felt like one of the things that we did was to show good character.
I know in all the history that I've been working with at the library, I saw a lot of writings from Mr. Phillips. And so it was very interesting, all the writings that he had done. So your children grew up in Palestine, and then did they go to college?
Yes. Susan was the first to go to college, and she went to Hanover College, and it's located in Indiana, close to Louisville, Kentucky. And she had 4 years and graduated there. Mm-hmm. And she became a teacher and settled in the Chicago area. Marianne later on in 6 years went to Indiana State as a paralegal, and she graduated there. And she taught for 7 years. Decided that she preferred doing something else. So she went back to college and got a degree in counseling.
And then your husband became a very well respected and well known attorney.
Yes. He worked very hard for that. He did not have his degree from University of Illinois, and he was in the counterintelligence in the during the wartime service in the Philippines, and what he did during that time, he got some credit. He finished up his degree, and when he went to decided that he wanted to study law. He studied law with Carol Cox, was president, Rudy Robinson, and finally passed the bar, and joined Cox Phillips at the time, and Robinson. Mm-hmm. So we were headed up a little.
Well, I also know that from experience, my own experience, that Kent was on the bank board here, the local, the original Farmer State Bank of Palestine.
Oh yes, the names. You kind of wish you could move it back, don't you?
Yes, that was really a very good time, and the bank was a very profitable.
Process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, change is inevitable. That we had a really good bank, and that's why they came in and wanted us so bad. But anyway, those were some good times at the bank. So I know you've got a lot of memories of the history of Palestine. Do you want to tell me about some of the businesses? There used to be so many grocery stores.
Yeah.
And
I remember that it seemed to me that there were 5 grocery stores just on Main Street, and starting at the north end of Main Street on the east side, there was Burris's Grocery. And I was this year again. Then in the next block, there was Ben Mims, was the second building. The Patton's Grocery, that was Fink's grandfather, was in where the Rocking Horse is now. Mitchell's Grocery Store was the last in that block. And on the other side of the street, on the west side, was Newlands, and that was starting from the south. There was a shoe repair shop in that block. There was a business named Castleman's, and they sold furnaces and hardware. Business there was a restaurant in also that block, and I think it was run by Coronas, and they ran a restaurant for several years in Palestine. Wonderful cook. They were the parents of Lucina Chambers, who lived here. There was another grocery store in that anyhow, a little barber shop in that area called Julian's Barber Shop. And on the corner of that block was Freeman's. It was the Freeman's that had the store in the next block, but it was Jim Freeman's, I think, and he had a little bit of everything, kind of a dark. But the story about him was one time that when they paved the street as a necessity, all of the business people. And was pretty difficult. I think it was an assessment of $5 for each of the frontage, $500 for each of the frontage of, where the building was. Well, this Mr. Freeman he had a frontage on Main Street, and since it was on the corner, he had the side of Grand Prairie Street, and then he had a home that was further on down on Main Street. So his assessment was so large, and he couldn't pay it, and he bought it, and he even took his case to the Supreme Court about it. It was quite a thing. I think he finally lost the case, and was trying to hurt him financially, and I don't he finally closed this. In the next block, of course, was the five million in grocery store. And then Rexall drugstore was run by Luther Buchanan. And then there was an insurance agency had a building loan in that block. There was the bank, of course. I think Weston and Gill, when I was working downtown, was in the next building next to the bank, I think. There was another building loan. One was called the Palestine building loan, and the other was the Crawford Valley, the Crawford building loan. In that block there was Powell's grocery store, and then the post office was on the corner. The bank building where that was the Five home, and it was a beautiful, big, old-fashioned home. It was built by the Woodworths in Robinson, and they lived there a while in some relation yet. But anyhow, that Mr. Fife was the undertaker for Palestine for a while before he sold it to Jim Goodwin. I remember when I was in grade school looking out and enjoying the mix of that home. It was so beautiful. That was still there. I can remember in grade school when there was a great big hotel on the corner, east, right south of grade school, and it burned, and all of the children in grade school got to stand out in the yard and watch the fire, watch the firemen fight the burning building, and it was completely destroyed. And later, there was another hotel was also built on the home. But that was something that I could remember as a child.
So where that Fife house was that you were talking about, is that the location of where the Regions Bank is now?
Yes.
Okay.
And they're on that corner.
I thought I remembered that house being at that corner.
It was beautiful. You know, as I remember about how Main Street was, and how all of the buildings, there was a dime store, and I don't think it was indexed like it became later, but there was a dime store in there, and of course that was where the kids all liked to go and spend their money. There was where the coffee cup was located, there was a little confectionery at one time when I was a small child. There was a Vogue theater that down on the very last block on Main Street on the east side, and there was a barber shop. I think we had 3 or 4 barber shops in there. It was right next to the Vogue theater. I remember one time having an earring, and they were saying, the only thing that they could do, we were at the Economy. And they took me into that barber shop so some man could blow smoke into my ear to make the one. That ear clip.
Did it work?
It worked. It worked. A lot of those old medical ways. When we built our house, my dad, after he had rented that place in Palestine, he finally got the location where he remodeled our house. And it was the home of, they called it the old Overhaulship place. And there was a family here with the name of Overhaulship. And it was an old house. And we lived there for quite a while. It was on the corner of Harrison and Jackson Street. And we remodeled it. And when they remodeled our house, my dad took the big kitchen that was part of the old house and moved it, and we lived in that kitchen all summer while we lived in the house. And it was fun. It was like camping out, and we had two great big beds in that kitchen and eating facilities, and lived in and out all the time. I remember in and out of all the houses that were built in that area. Saw them from digging the basements with the horses, and they were not concerned about kids getting into too much trouble. So and that carpenters would really go to all those houses, into the basements and go through the parts of the building and jump off of the roofs and have fun.
So what do you think about Palestine in today's world versus the way it used to be?
Well, it's different. I don't think that people can just turn their kids loose like they used to do. We played out every night under the street lights till almost bedtime. You don't see kids doing that. The first sign of spring was when you would hear somebody roller skating on the main street. And kids played out all the time, more than we did now. There were no organized ball teams or anything. The only people who played ball were people who went to school and had the ball teams in school. We played, and we had carnivals. We made our own fun. We had neighborhood kids who gathered together, and maybe we would have a little carnival or something like that. I remember one time that other old couple, when we would advertise it, we never took money. You had to pay with either nails or matches or something. Of course, matches were a little bit hard to come by for little kids. But anyhow, one time we used our imagination a lot more than kids do now. There were no plastic toys you could go buy. We took boxes and made things out of them. We made streetcars and we had this one carnival we had a board on the top of some kind of a bucket or something. It was carnival guide. You had to pay so many nails and matches or something to ride there. And the little boy fell off of that, broke his arm.
Oh.
People were not as suit conscious then as they are nowadays. So I guess that's one of the differences.
So what are some of the things that life has taught you?
Well, it taught me frugal. I had to be. My dad never was without me, but he did not make the money and that we made today, of course. And my mother took, took care of the home in a very frugal way. And I can still remember when I was 12 and the feeling that I'm kind of watching them.
Yes, that's a very good point. Very good point. So what words of wisdom can you give to the younger generation?
Oh dear. It's not that I didn't make lots of mistakes in my lifetime, but I would say family life means so much. And education means so much. It worries me about our schools. It worries me because young people are picking up so much in the way of not too good morals, and they forget that how important it is to try to live a decent life. I don't think that I could give anybody any advice. I've had such a good life myself. There's been ups and downs, of course. But importance, so much importance of family. And it seems that the family is kind of dwindling down, and maybe they're not being taught what the better things in life.
Do you think that has anything to do with the fact that most couples, both the husband and the wife, have to have jobs to survive, or think they do?
This is true, and I realize that. I think the wants of people today are so much greater than they were, and there were things that we wanted all of our lives, but we realized that if we didn't have the money to pay for them, we had to wait until we did. Now, the value of money is, well, credit cards, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
They're not all good.
No.
Because people take the attitude that they can pay for it later, and well, just like I said, when we started housekeeping, we paid $10 a month for that. Of course, you can do that now.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose that $10 house would sell at least, or rent for at least 100 or more. But I wonder how our young people would accept living like we used to,
Mm-hmm.
that we were having.
Well, happiness is the main thing. But there have been so many changes, just like in Palestine today. We don't even have one grocery store. And
Well, wonder why that is. Is it because it's more of a mobile society? People can get in a car and go, and it's a little kind of an excursion to go somewhere else. And they don't shop at home. They could go and look around and get maybe better away from home. we didn't have that. What transportation we had when I was a child was getting on the train. And we went once this summer to visit our grandparents and my aunts and uncles. I had 5 cousins in Pinckneyville, and I loved to go there. We enjoyed it. One time, one of my cousins, I was the youngest in the whole family, and one of my cousins said, in Pinckneyville there was a water tower and a ball on top of the water tower. And he told me when I was little that if I would go up there, there was somebody up on that water tower on that ball that would give away ice cream. Well, of course, I believed him. He was my cousin. He was telling me the truth. So I started up the water tower. But they stopped me really quick. They didn't let me go there. But that was the fun that we had. And they treated me like a baby. But I would believe everything they said. I had many cousins, and it was much fun.
Families got together a lot more back then, didn't they?
They did. They did. And we went to Miriam on the little excursions once in a while. We didn't. My dad did not have a car, but some of the people did. We would have picnics. We would go to the river and maybe with a tent and camp out. And everybody would come and they would bring ice cream machines, and we would make homemade ice cream, and we'd have food and fried chicken and all those good things to eat, and just an enjoyable time. Just everybody proud there. Mm-hmm. You miss that.
I think so too. So over the years, you've seen a lot of changes in the whole world, and the news stories and how fast the news gets out.
Yeah, we had wartime at the time of World War II. And of course, I was alive during World War I. One thing I can remember about it is when on the armistice of World War I, we lived in Indianapolis, and when we went to a celebration at the Circle in Indianapolis, and I was so small that I was riding on the shoulders of my dad, and so I wouldn't be trampled with the crowd was so large. And but on World War II, what amazes me is how everybody buckled down. I can remember that we in rationing, for instance, we had ration books, we had rations for gasoline and tires on cars. We couldn't buy a new car at the time, and even after the war, you had to be on a list for a long time to get a car. And several of my friends had to wait quite a while. We had a hand-me-down that was from a car that I used that my father had gotten finally. But how everybody did their best to, with the rationing and all, about you couldn't get certain foods and sugar, coffee, everything you had to have a ration coupon for, and clothing even, and to buy a tube of toothpaste, you had to take a tube of an old toothpaste again because it was made from the lead, soft lead, and that was before plastics, and you had to take something to turn in to get a new toothpaste.
Wow.
But of course, in the grocery stores, the amount of things even like Jello, because it had sugar in it, and you had to use coupons.
Oh.
So you didn't use your coupons for anything frivolous. You had to give some thought to it. Many times you couldn't get meat and maybe you would be happy with a can of salmon or a can of cream or whatever was on the market at the time for a Sunday dinner, because meat was even scarcer. You had to ask the lunch for everything. So I remember shoes couldn't be made of leather, and children allowed those shoes. Well, you had to have a good fun because, and finally they came out with canvas shoes, and it's like sandals and things, but you can get those because it was the leather with the shoes that they used for the walking. It was something good news here, and but everybody cooperated, everybody, and I think that that's when women started doing working, then of course they kept it up. Things became more available and economic. I think that is
How many years did that last that you had baby?
all during and even after the war, it was there for quite a while. But you couldn't buy new lumber, and you couldn't buy new appliances, and you just had to wait until things began to be available to buy. I remember that we went into the repair in this house because we were so anxious to get a better heating system, get rid of all the stoves we were using. And my husband and another person, a few grandmother, went to Robinson and bought a used heating system from some lady who was getting rid of radiators and things like that. And they brought that over and installed it in our house because you couldn't buy new.
Mm-hmm.
And the lady was disposing of her home, and that took care of her heating system for a while. Of course, it had to be updated several times. But that's just one of the circumstances. Mm-hmm. Your mileage on your car, gasoline, of course. We sometimes went to Vincent's, or maybe Terre Haute, to buy clothing, which is not available around here. And they had buses that was a bus ran to Vincent's, I think 2 or 3 times a week. I was working at the time because my husband was in service, and the bus would leave in the afternoon, and on my day off, I would go to the inside of the bus. Maybe I needed a new coat or something that was getting pretty well along. You may do.
Mm-hmm.
You may do.
Mm-hmm. So, how long have you lived in this location, in this house?
We lived, I think, let's see, we moved down there. We were married in 1936. I think we moved out after Kent's grandfather, Cotton, died. He lived just a few years after his wife died, and the house became vacant, and Kent's mother had inherited it, and she asked us if we'd like to move into the house. That was, I would say, that was about 1938 or 1939. And the house was an old house, but it's been our house ever since. We've done not much in our and fixing, but it's comfortable.
Well, it's a nice house, and it's always been one of my favorite houses in town, and it's one of the best locations.
It's one of the older houses in Palestine. I can remember when Kid had 5 aunts, or they were his mother's aunts, because he was great aunt. They lived in a large house on this 2 days, or 2 houses up south of us, or east of us, on the corner. And everybody remembers the big old Hatton home. And when we first got married and we moved out in this area, there were three of the aunts were still living. One time, Ken's brother asked grandmother Patton, why did none of the girls in your family ever get married? And one of the girls said, well, because Mama didn't want us to. And I guess that was in the days when you paid attention to Mama. But that was a pretty good sized family. They had the oldest person in the family was Raj Patton. He was and became a doctor, and he did, and I think still had his family around Charleston. Then there was Carl Patton, who was his grandfather, and he built this house, and his mother and his her 2 sisters were married in the parlors of this house, and kind of scattered. And but the old Patton house stood. And when we moved out here, there were, I think, 3 of them still living. Martha was still living, and Emily and May. May died soon after we moved out here. And Emily and Martha lived here. Martha was crippled. She was broken in hip, and in those days when you break a hip, you're difficult the rest of your life. But anyhow, Emily was the sole survivor. Something funny, a little story I'm going to tell about Emily. She was a little more independent than the rest of them, and suddenly she decided she wanted a house of her own. And she was a milliner. She had a millinery shop. Well, anyhow, she built her a little house. And at one time, the Pattons owned land from this Grand Prairie area clear out to the gravel pit out of the curve as you're going to Robinson. And that's where she wanted to build her house. She built a little house, and I suppose it was a very comfortable house. And she moved out there and lived by herself. One day she was it had a cellar, and it had one of those cellar doors that you open it. She went down there to get some canning jars or something, and the wind blew the door shut, and she was locked in the basement in the cellar of that house. And it was, of course, no electricity or anything. And she found a jar lid, and she dug herself out of the basement with that jar lid. Now, isn't that a cool story to tell?
Wow.
But anyhow, I think that was the end of that house. Anyhow, she moved back in, and she lived in the big house there until she died the year that Marianne was born, and that Marianne was born in 1946. And because when she was so fascinated by a new baby in the neighborhood, that she kept coming over, and she would bring a basket or something. One time she was almost blind, and she brought a basket of apples. Well, the apples were practically rotten, and she didn't know that. But she wanted to hold the baby, and I would say, look, just sit down in the chair, I will put her in my lap, because she was too tottery. I wasn't going to put her in while she was standing there. And she loved to come over there and see the baby. And I would take her over there. And she died I would say she died in, maybe 1940, 89, like that. But the story of her digging herself out of the basement and stuff was really wrong.
Well, that's something to be proud of, that she had that much initiative to do that.
She was. There was only other one way there to get out, and she dug it. I suppose the basements in those days, maybe they were bricked up. I don't know, but they were probably just dirt,
Mm-hmm.
and the house built over that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the cellar, as they called it,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where she kept her canning goods, her jars, her storage.
Mm.
But she got caught that way.
So it'd be more like a crawl space, only a basement.
There's a basement.
Yeah, yeah.
So anyhow, she found the jar lid in the dark. She got herself out.
I don't think I could do that. And
Well,
I've had to work hard all my life, but I can't picture myself doing that.
I can't help but think that it was either do or die.
Well, you do what you have to do.
Yeah. And I can, the whole family has thought about that so often. That's a story we like to tell.
Yeah, that's something to be proud of. So do you have any other good stories?
Oh, dear.
You probably have lots of them.
There's a lot of them that over the years, they come and they go. One time, just a few years back, we lost our electricity. And, of course, you lose electricity, you can't read, and you can't watch television, you can't listen to the radio, you're lost. So I sat here, and I thought about, it was quite a few hours without electricity. And I got to thinking about when I was a child, who lived where, in the whole thing. Well, of course, I was more accustomed to the Harrison Street area, and that's where I lived as a child.
Mm-hmm.
And I could do breakfast with everybody. But people were not. They sat out and they were neighborly. They visited back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
They were kind to their neighbors. I remember people. Their name was Stout, and they were really old people. I suppose maybe I thought old. I used to think old was shorter, but these people were the older people of their neighborhood, and we played around. They never fussed if we got in their yard or anything, and they were always happy to. And when my dad bought that house back there, he bought a lot, also part of the lots. I bought the lot where the Raps built and then the house where the John Maddox lives was built by a person by the name of Frank Dean, and I watched that house go up. And then the house on the corner was built by Ward Bartley, and he had a daughter who was not my age, we played together. And I saw all those houses go up, and I could almost tell you about every piece of board and how the basements were arranged, everything about them. They were nice bungalow type houses, and that was in the boom of the railroad days when everybody had a job. And it was. Let's see, what else could I? But anyhow, I named, and we went to the park every day, and every once in a while to play, and we played in the park up there instead of worrying about us being down there. Mm-hmm. And they had swings, and they had things that we didn't have at home. We had fun, and the park had a little zoo. They had a bear, and they had a deer, of course, and they had raccoons and this little animals came up, and we loved to go. Somebody finally threw a cigarette onto the bear, and it burned him, and he had to put it away. And I thought, what a terrible understandable.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got friends that can remember playing outside all the time and going to the park every day in Palestine. And it was a good time to grow up, and it was a fun time.
It was a fun time.
And nobody really had anything, but you didn't feel poor, did you?
You know, you didn't worry about not having any great amount of money, because you had friends that just like you. And I remember we went as a teenager. We went to the sweet shop, and if you had a nickel, you could maybe get a Coke, or you could get a milkshake for a nickel. If you wanted ice cream in it, it cost $1. But if you just chocolate milk, you could get a nickel. And we'd take up all the chairs, and they had the music, we called it the electro music. And somebody always had another nickel to put in that. And we would sit, that was our evening entertainment. I had a friend who cleaned her uncle's house, and he gave her a quarter to clean, and she asked him to save it till he got $1, and when she got $1, she would buy her something out of it. She didn't have $2 nickels to spend, but she always joined in. We always had fun. And in our dating time, there was a man here who had an old touring car. It didn't have a top or anything. It was just a two-seated car, and I think it had a leather or a canvas top that went over it, but usually never put it on. But anyhow, he hauled us all around town. He was one of the few. A doctor's son had a car if the father wasn't really good, and he would have a father. So nobody had cars. We walked. We walked, and we hiked. And my dad was a good outdoors person, and as children, he would on Sunday afternoon he'd take us for a hike through the woods and to the park, and it was family time.
Well, that sounds like a wonderful time to grow up, and it sounds a little bit like the time that I grew up. So,
a few years away.
Yeah, that it was a good time to grow up, and now we worry about our kids and drugs and
yes, I'm so grateful that I had the childhood that I had. There were sad times, and there were times when you felt deprived, but you didn't have to worry. You knew things would get better. And sometimes things don't always get better with money. You make do if you don't. It's a different time. I'm glad I even used my family before drugs, before. I think there was something, we used to have little bands around, and in some of those bands I think there was talk about somebody maybe smoking a reefer or something like that, but there was not anything you noticed, and it was good music time. It was good music during the wars too. I loved the music from the different wars. It was nostalgic. I still got and good CDs and things like that. I thought that music on.
I know my mother had quite a collection of records. She still loved to play her records. Even up to the time that she died, we would sit and play records.
And she's really enjoyed it. It was her time, her time of life. And she, I think so much of the privileges that we used to have. And music was such an important part of life, even in our churches. And the churches were part of our life growing up. We had endeavors in the evening. We had Wednesday night prayer meetings. We went to Sunday school. We went to church. The churches were a social life at that time. So,
and we were talking about the grocery stores, how many grocery stores were in Palestine back then. There was a lot of churches, and there was a lot of country schools, and and working on all this history that I've been working on for the library, I was amazed because I didn't realize there was that many country schools and churches everywhere, and now all the churches are, it seems to me like they're going downhill and they're dissolving.
Yes, that's true. People well, of course, other social life has taken that place. More fun times, like movies. We went to the movies when they were silent movies. They had the words up on the screen that people were saying, and they had a piano player. I remember Mel Shapley played the piano to the music, and his horses would be galloping and all, and played all the so music, and we used to have Charleston contests also.
Oh.
And then every once in a while, after the movie, there'd be a Charleston contest. We had a boy here who his name was Turk Sears. He could do the Charleston like nobody's business. He was just a little kid, and he always won all the prizes. They had the Charleston contest.
Of course, there used to be youth centers in all the small towns too. I remember Palestine had a big youth centers, and that was a good place for the kids to go and have dances and play games.
But they suddenly disappeared, don't they? Why did they have to make places for kids to have fun? If you don't have cars and you don't have money, you make your own life, you make your own fun, you make your own entertainment.
So progress isn't always good. Because I shouldn't say most kids, but it seems like a lot of them, when they are old enough to get their driver's license, they have a car.
They're gone. And it's no fun to just go to Palestine. They got to go to Robinson. They got to go to Flat Rock. And they got to go to Vincent's. They got to go to Carroll. We used to get on our radios, and the radios were a lot different than they are today. There wasn't anything like FM. It was all AM. Lots of static and everything. And we would get our music. We would take a radio on, and of course, if the weather was bad, we wouldn't get a very good tone out of it. But we would get Trianon in Chicago and the Avalon and to the different motels and hotels, big hotels, and we tuned in and get their music, and that's what we danced to a lot of the time. We didn't have records. We danced to the Trianon in Chicago.
Oh,
yeah. And then there was a lot of kids went to Carroll to dances. And they had dances in Palestine all over the world. They had little bands, and they'd sell tickets. And that's where you would go with your date for the evening.
Well, this is really interesting. So, do you have any of your relatives? Are they still living?
No, I am the only member of my family. My brother died from a sudden heart attack. He had retired and he was living in Florida. And he had been mowing the grass down there. And he came in and sat down in the chair and died. My mother and dad, of course, were already gone. And so that was just the two of us, and we were close, and it was hard. He had no children, but he loved our kids, and he and his wife, they talked about adopting some child, but they felt that they should not do that. And Bill had a very good job on the railroad. He was smashing ahead, and had made good money, and he enjoyed, and he was the light of my mother's eye. I mean, anything that Bill would do, and Bill did many bad things. he didn't run with the rest of the crowd, and but anyhow, I always felt he was her favorite. But and, that was it. He was my favorite too.
Yeah. Well, that's nice. You had a close relationship.
Yeah.
How old was he when he died?
He was in his 60s. He had just retired and built a home in St. Augustine, Florida. Well, he did go village in that area, and was enjoying life, and didn't, his wife stayed in the home when she died, and so that was the end of that era. I have no cousins living anywhere. They all lived in southern Illinois, Carbondale, and Hickmerdale, and that area. And of course, just the two of us, Bill and I, and my family. So there's nobody left but me.
Well, he died pretty young. If he was just in his 60s.
Yes. Yeah, I think maybe 67 or 68. And was set for retirement in Florida. And I friends there. And Chris St. Augustine, you in that area, you get some cold weather, but not like this fall. They had usually chilly weather. Not far enough south in Florida.
Did you get to visit him often?
Oh yes, we did quite often. And even after he died, we went down having to kind of see about his wife, and sometimes we stay there, sometimes we stay in a motel, and kept up with her when she died. I kind of checked out there and said, probably too long with the
Yes. Well, that's too bad he didn't enjoy retirement very long.
The girls, when they would come see us, he would tell stories about what Bill and I used to do when we were kids to aggravate Mom, and he would tell his stories, and I can hear him yet laughing. He laughed with his whole body, and the kids, of course, loved every minute of it. These tales about how their mom would act up and do things they shouldn't have done. They loved that. I miss that very much.
So you've got how many grandchildren do you have?
I have my daughter Susan has had two children, a boy and a girl, The girl was the older. Her name is Deanna. She lives in Valparaiso. And the boy lives in California. And then Marianne had Johnny, and they lived at one of the fields when he was born until he was in out of high school, and then they moved out. And then I've got three little great granddaughters in California, and two great grandsons in Valparaiso. One is out of high school, and one is in high school at Valparaiso. The two little girls are I think 3 and 6 and 8. We were kind of sad. Our oldest little granddaughter in California was born with what's the syndrome?
Down
Syndrome. And but she's a small child, a healthy little child. She has a handicap that she doesn't speak well, and she's in special school. But California really takes care of
Yes.
the people that need help. And they're broke too, like other kids.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. She's in the special school, and she's a lovely little child. A Down syndrome child has a love in their hearts.
That's what I've heard. They are the most loving child there is. I've heard. Happy children.
There seems to be only handicapped except for speech.
How old is she now?
Well, I said 8 while ago, but I think she's 10 now.
Oh, really?
So they're growing up faster than I'm seeing.
Well, the years go by pretty fast.
They do.
What part of California do they live in?
They live in wait a minute, I gotta think. Close to Los Angeles.
I know. My family, I've got a lot of family that live out there. Palmdale, Lancaster, Anaheim.
Yeah. Well, this, I'll think about it anyway. They bought a condo. Of course, he is in the music business, and he writes music for advertising and sometimes movies and his wife works. He is the daddy and caretaker of these little girls, and he because he does most of his work for himself. And they get along fine.
Good for him.
He's a special little boy.
Yeah.
He was a little boy, and he's still a little boy, but he's in his 40s.
Well, your children will always be your children and your grandchildren.
This is true.
So now both of your daughters, one of your daughters lives in Florida full time?
That's her full-time home. But they come to Valparaiso. They bought a condo in Valparaiso so they could get out of the Florida heat in the summertime. So they come out here in the latter part of May, and they stay till first of October, and then they go back. But the permanent home is Florida, in Naples. And of course, Marianne and John bought a condo in Naples in the same area, but about 3 or 4 miles from each other, and the two girls enjoy each other, and they shop and they walk and they get along well.
Well, that's nice.
And I'm glad they do. But there was 6 years difference in their ages, and then Marianne was a baby and Susie was going to school. It was kind of bothering with a little sister, but everything turns out well.
That's good. That's good. And I know you've got a lot of friends, and you belong to. I noticed in the history that I've been working on, I have volumes of all the clubs and organizations that
Oh,
they used to
yeah.
have in the area.
Yes.
And I don't think there's that many clubs and organizations nowadays.
There used to be a little sewing club that my dog brother belonged to called the Needlecraft. And they always took in like embroidery or knitting or whatever and spent the afternoon and served with freshmen, you know. Then there was a Priscilla Club and they, I don't know, I think they did pretty much the same and they'd meet on Thursday afternoon. The kids, if they were in school and were small, they got to go to where the novelists and they usually got refreshments. And they always looked forward to another going to the club that day. And there was, you know, of course, there was the Lions Club for the band, and oh, different, yeah, it's various. And as I said, the current topic, the one I belong to now, started as young brides who had married local men, and they were, you know, that wanting to get together, and they usually took the children to the meetings, and the needlecraft, the current topic that I'm talking about, and that was the perfect place to keep up with the current topics. And they would have programs and they'd study, and the children played. It was something for the young brides in town to do. If you became a new bride and you married a local guy, you probably became a member of the current club over the years. There were some older ones in there too. Mm-hmm. I'm the oldest one, but good time to keep it. Most people work now, and they can't join these clubs. Mm-hmm. And the women never worked in those days years ago, and they held and raised their family and the father. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That was a good time. That was a good time. Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to say? Any other stories? I think that's all the questions I have. You know, the thing about it is, when you get me to talking, I don't have anything in order, but one thing makes me think of something else, and then I go to another subject. So I'm not too well organized in my talks. That doesn't matter. I think it could be broken down into something that might be interesting to somebody in the future. I think so too. And you know, I think that history is kind of a lost art. I know when my granddad was up in years, he decided to put together a history of his life. And I don't know if you've done that, but I know a lot of people have. To a certain extent. And I remember when Ken's mother was a widow and lonely, I would most afternoons go out and visit with her. And she would talk, just like I'm talking today, she liked to talk about her childhood and how sorry I am that I didn't take a tape recorder, and she wouldn't have wanted me to, but I would have maybe could have done it secretly and just let her tell about her school days, because she talked about it, and she said she didn't like school, and she said I could hear that bell, and that I just feel chilled all over. I'd have to go to school. I'd never wanted to go to school, and she went clear through high school, which was unusual in those days for him to get even a full high school graduation, or high school diploma. And but I didn't do it, so I can just remember the way she used to talk, and that it gave her a chance to get out of her system and things that she wanted to talk about, and how much I enjoyed them. And why I didn't think about that, I don't know. I suppose we always think we're better than that.
I guess we do.
But your idea of writing a little story about the life, we don't think about that till we get to thinking about our obituaries.
Yeah, I've still got my granddad's, and then my mother decided she wanted to write her life story, and sometimes it's not entirely accurate depending on who's doing the writing. But it might be tainted a little bit.
Yeah.
But
well, it's the way she remembered it.
That's true.
And sometimes maybe her memories were not just exactly right, but this is the way she remembered it. And that's the way she wanted to tell it.
That's right. Because like if you have two siblings or more, or just one, each one of you is going to remember things differently.
This is true. Yeah. But perhaps that's the reason that there's usually a little difference in the way people tell stories. Because everybody remembers it differently. Or maybe they just make it sound a little better.
Yeah, that's true. Well, you make it sound very good, and I appreciate this time.
It's been my pleasure.
And
as I said, I wander around. I think, after all, I will be 99 years old in October, and that is a long time to live. I can remember the day when I was about 40 years old. But geez, I'm just a kid anymore.
I know. Heck, that you're just barely in your prime at 40. Of course, the years go by so fast, and when you're young, you don't think about it.
Right. Yes, well, anyhow, it's
that you and I both have seen a lot of changes, and,
oh my goodness,
and we've seen,
the changes, and you can't help but you kind of like to live again and see what the changes will be in the next generation and the generation after that. Some of it is going to be really exciting.
But some of it is almost going to be like science fiction,
too. This is true. This is true. But we'll go on, and Palestine will go on just as well. And the schools, I know they're struggling, but they'll get through, and things will change. Kent used to say, we used to talk about some of the, like the flapper age when they had the first bobbed their hair, the women, and wore the skirts short. Well, Kent said, it'll go back to the long skirts again one of these days. The trends change, you go back from one to the other, and it goes that way. And it did. It did. Yeah. We go through different phases of life, and maybe that's what makes it interesting. I guess, because they always said that there would never be another depression. That it might not have been a full-blown depression, but we've gone through some hard times since then. Right. And it's just a matter. As a child, and I lived through that through the teenage years. It went on for quite a while, and now we've lived in this inflationary period, and it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard to adjust again. Yes, it is. Certainly. Well, thank you. I thank you very much, Francine, for your time, and it's been informative, and I'm sure there's lots more that you can tell me. I'll think after you leave. I'll think of why didn't I mention that? Well, we can always get together again if you want to. Well, it's been fun. It's been real fun. And thank you so much.